96%. That is the documented fraction of Russian military casualties in March 2026 caused by drones. Not artillery, not infantry, not airstrikes. Drones. 35,351 soldiers in a single month, killed by machines that cost between $400 and $800 each. Every one of those machines runs on chips. Almost all of those chips come from one island, and every government in the world is already learning the same lesson, and none of them will say it out loud. The human soldier has always been the most expensive weapon in any arsenal, not because of equipment, because of political cost. A dead soldier requires a press conference. It requires a family notification, a coffin, a ceremony. In a democratic state, it activates electoral consequences. In an autocratic state, it feeds the demographic hemorrhage that threatens regime stability itself. Russia is currently recruiting approximately 940 soldiers every day while sustaining losses that exceed that rate, a demographic attrition spiral that a production line does not face. The United States military recognized this calculus explicitly. The Replicator Initiative, launched by the Department of Defense in August 2023, states its goal plainly: deploy autonomous systems precisely because they are attritable, the military's word for something you can afford to lose without political consequence. No name on a memorial, no family to notify, no press conference required. Ukraine's war became the laboratory where this new math got stress-tested at scale. Ukraine was deploying approximately 9,000 drones per day in active combat operations by late 2025. Monthly FPV production capacity reached 200,000 units by end of 2024, on track for 8 million units annually by 2026. More consequentially, AI-guided terminal autonomy increased hit rates from 15% to 60%. These are not prototype weapons developed in defense laboratories. They are manufactured in distributed civilian networks at volumes that resemble consumer electronics production, not defense procurement. This industry was not planned by any defense ministry. It emerged from existential pressure, the need to substitute for the demographic and industrial asymmetry Russia would otherwise exploit. Ukraine could not match Russia's conscript pool. It built a different kind of soldier. The numbers tell the real story. The Lucas system, the low-cost, uncrewed combat attack system, saw its first confirmed combat deployment in February 2026. Unit cost, $35,000. The Tomahawk cruise missile, it functionally replaces costs $2.5 million, a 71-to-1 cost ratio. A $400 FPV drone is already cheaper than the artillery shell it replaces. The U.S. Department of Defense's FY 2025 AI and autonomy budget stands at $25.2 billion, growing faster than any other line item in the defense portfolio. Palantir's Maven AI contract grew from $480 million to $1.3 billion in 12 months. Anduril Industries, one of the leading manufacturers of autonomous munitions, has already opened an office in Taiwan to expand production partnerships. The silicon supply chain is already moving toward Taipei. If Ukraine is proving that autonomous systems can absorb battlefield attrition that human armies cannot sustain, what happens to the political calculus of every government watching this? What comes next would permanently rewrite the economics of war. Here's what no defense ministry will publicly state, but all of them know. A destroyed drone generates zero political cost, no family notification, no memorial service, no parliamentary question, no electoral consequence. When Russia lost 35,351 soldiers in March 2026, that number required active suppression, managed information, denied casualty reports, controlled public narrative. When Ukraine intercepted 33,000 Russian UAVs in the same period, no equivalent political pressure applied to the other side. The asymmetry is not incidental, it is structural. and it applies equally to democracies and autocracies alike. The United States does not hold press conferences about destroyed replicator drones. Israel does not hold memorial services for failed loitering munitions. The political accountability gap between a fallen soldier and a downed drone is the real engine of this revolution, not battlefield effectiveness, not technological superiority. And every government in the world simultaneously has done this math. The United States is spending $25 billion annually on AI and autonomy. China's People's Liberation Army is running 3 to 6 month acquisition cycles for autonomous weapon systems, compared to years in Western procurement programs. China now operates the world's largest combat unmanned surface vehicle, 420 tons, compared to the U.S. Navy's 145-ton Sea Hunter. Iran's Shahed program, originally designed for political deniability, is now producing 208 units per day for Russian operations. Israel's autonomous weapons doctrine is the most operationally mature of any military on Earth. None of these states is making an independent strategic judgment. They are all responding to the same economic signal. If every major power is converging on the same autonomous weapons logic simultaneously, what institution has the authority to slow it down? Every defense ministry in the world was making the same calculation, but none had traced where the math ultimately led. TSMC controls approximately 70% of the global foundry market and over 90% of leading-edge chip production. There is no practical alternative at scale. Every advanced autonomous weapon system, Anduril's Altius and Roadrunner, Palantir's Maven Battlefield AI, the U.S. Air Force's Collaborative Combat Aircraft Program, China's PLA autonomous vehicle fleet, depends on advanced semiconductors manufactured at the leading process nodes. All of it runs through one company. That company's primary fabrication facilities are located on a 36,000 square kilometer island in the Taiwan Strait. Machines scale exponentially. Populations cannot. The demographic math that is pushing every low birth rate industrial state toward autonomous attrition makes this dependency structural and self-reinforcing. The transition from human to autonomous warfare is not a choice that can be reversed by policy. It is an economic inevitability embedded in demographics, in cost ratios, and now in geography. The autonomous weapons revolution runs on chips manufactured by a single private company in a single geographic location that is itself the most contested territory on Earth. Anduril opened an office in Taipei. This was not a coincidence. It was an acknowledgement. The supply chain for the weapons of the next great power war runs through the territory that war would most likely be fought over. If the entire autonomous weapons revolution runs on chips manufactured by a single company in a single location, what happens to that revolution if that location becomes a battlefield? And who, exactly, is responsible for answering that question? The weapons designed to deter or prevail in a conflict over Taiwan require Taiwan's uninterrupted production to exist. Let that stand. Anduril's autonomous munitions. The U.S. Air Force's $28 billion Collaborative Combat Aircraft Program. The Navy's Ghost Fleet. The PLA's autonomous surface vessel fleet. Every single one structurally dependent on TSMC. A conflict over Taiwan would, with high probability, interrupt TSMC's production. The weapons of the war require the conditions the war would destroy. TSMC's Arizona facility is now producing 4-nanometer chips, but at a higher cost and lower volume than its Taiwan fabs. The hedge does not yet exist at the scale the revolution requires. The paradox is structural, not rhetorical, and no government, no international body, no treaty framework has even formally acknowledged this paradox exists. 166 of 193 UN member states voted in December 2024 to to move toward regulating lethal autonomous weapon systems, nearly unanimous. The Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons Framework, where any binding treaty would need to be negotiated, remains deadlocked, blocked by consensus exploitation from the United States, Russia, India, and Israel. The campaign to stop killer robots, representing over 250 organizations globally, has been formally advocating for a binding treaty since 2012. 14 years. 0 binding instruments. The governance architecture has not failed to respond to the autonomous weapons revolution. It has actively chosen not to, which means the question is no longer whether this transition happens. The question is what it means for everything else. The economic logic at the heart of this transition is self-reinforcing. Drone unit costs are falling from $400 toward $40, a trajectory already visible in China's production scaling. As those costs fall, the political cost asymmetry between human and machine casualty widens further. A state that currently saves political capital by deploying autonomous systems will save even more as those systems become cheaper. The math does not reverse. The governance gap reinforces the same way the cost curve does. States deploying systems that generate 0 domestic political cost have no incentive to accept international constraints on them. The accountability asymmetry that makes autonomous weapons economically irresistible is the same force that makes them politically unregulatable. Every low birth rate industrial state faces a version of Russia's constraint. Japan, Germany, South Korea, the United States. All are demographically constrained military powers facing the same structural pressure, pushing every defense ministry toward the same answer. The TSMC Arizona hedge, 4 nanometer production at higher cost and lower volume, is the current best-case scenario for semiconductor geographic diversification. It is not sufficient. The paradox already exists. The revolution is already built, already deployed, already scaling. But here is what changes permanently when you understand the system. When you see a headline about drone warfare in Ukraine, you are not reading a military technology story. You are reading the economic logic of accountability in action. When you see a defense budget announcement increasing AI and autonomy spending, you are watching a government reduce its political liability for casualties, not improve its military capability. When you see Taiwan Strait tension, the sanctions talk, the naval exercises, the diplomatic brinkmanship, you are watching the world's most contested supply chain for the most consequential weapons revolution in modern history. Dead drones do not appear in casualty reports. They do not generate press conferences. They do not create domestic political consequences. That is not a side effect of autonomous warfare. That is the entire point, and the entire industry built on that logic runs on chips from an island that is itself the consequence the logic is supposed to help states avoid. The autonomous weapons revolution was architected to project power across contested straits. In doing so, it has created the most concentrated single point of failure in military history, measured not in servers, not in satellites, but in one island's uninterrupted output. Understanding this does not resolve the paradox, but it permanently changes what you see when you look at it.